From LALATE headquarters in Santa Monica, this is Afternoons LALATE.
It's a big afternoon of Afternoons LALATE with a special report about your fourth stimulus check update live at Afternoons about what happened with the President of the United States yesterday and what's going to happen in the next few days. That fourth stimulus recon passed the House and was supposed to pass the Senate, he said, on Wednesday. So what happened by Thursday and what happening today? I'll have the latest details on the president's pivot on this recon, which pays you a lot of checks, upwards of a lot of $15,000. Those incredible checks covered in this recon. We'll go back over to the incredible sums of money that are available for you right now from third stimulus, and the viewers of this channel have cleaned up from that and will continue to clean up throughout the holidays. This is your Christmas stimulus, your holiday stimulus, how you get an average about $5,000 across the board in recent days. I'll go over the latest details on that. We'll be going over to student loan debt forgiveness as well and to fifth stimulus, but this is a very different recording. This is a live special report about what happened with the President of the United States yesterday, what has happened with the President of the United States over the last few months, and where are we going forward on the fourth stimulus recon. It's moreover even a more different video across the board because I will be live and in the live chat with you and interacting and answering some of your questions. It's a brand new show you've never seen before, and it's a special report tonight. There may be a second one tonight on Evenings LA, much like what you're watching right now. But there's so much questions about what happened in the last 48 hours when the president, Chuck Schumer, Nancy, and Joe Manchin, that it needs to be explained categorically, slowly, and analytically. Because a confusing process to understand why was the recon not passed by Christmas and where it is going to be passed. I have all those incredible details over this incredible recording. It's an extended live special report about your fourth stimulus recon, first covered on this channel back in April, the first channel to ever cover the recon, and will be the first to finish the recon with you as it becomes law. With that, let's go into the incredible great news, but first, you're watching a special report of Afternoons LALATE. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're having a beautiful day. And that recon was supposed to become a law Christmas, which Chuck Schumer said, and also said that it was going to pass the Senate by Christmas. Also, the President of the United States said it on Wednesday. So what happened by Thursday and what's happening tonight? I have all the incredible details in this special live record in which I go over this recon from day one all the way up to the present so you understand where we are right tonight and where we're going forward. When I usually report on a fourth stimulus recon video, I give you all the incredible information about the checks and the programs and how to get paid. But I think tonight it's very important to explain where are we, because it's very confusing what had happened in less than a few hours. In fact, the last 2 weeks I said, do not miss a single video by the minute or by the hour because the situation is very fluid. And boy, was it fluid. In fact, I even considered sending out a statement from the LA Alerts last night explaining what had happened, but I thought, you can't put in a few words because it's too confusing. So with that, I'm going to go over this in this video, where we are right now, where the recon is going, and where it's heading. The start of what I want you to understand before we start is that the recon is going to become a law. It is going to become a law. The question is when and why did it not get done by this end of this Christmas week? I'll have all the latest details, but first subscribe, like this video, consider becoming a member, and sign up for the #1 most watched financial news channel in America on geopolitical news. This is LALATE. Sign up for those LALATE alerts as well so you do not miss a single video across the board. And as detailed earlier, I believe Evenings LALATE may also be live as well, much like this special report. The fourth stimulus recon was part of a original massive spending bill proposed by the President of the United States in early 2021. In fact, this was the very first place anywhere where the expression fourth stimulus was ever mentioned. I coined the expression on this channel when many people were still talking about third stimulus. It was originally one massive bill. It had two components to it. One was roads and bridges, and the other part was this, the recon. Now, over the next few weeks, we thought it was going to get passed by July. In fact, we thought that because we were told by Leader Schumer. He's the majority leader of the Senate. He determines when voting's passed and when voting happens. And he said this monstrosity was going to pass by July. Now, he was not alone. The Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, had said the same, much the same as well. And she's the person who determines when things are called for the vote in the House. Well, what happened? Why did they not get it done in July? Because we first saw major details of what was in this recon by May. In fact, by May, we were told that a monthly IRS stimulus check was going in there. We had no less than 5 different groups saying that MSCs were going in there. MSC referring to multiple IRS stimulus checks. We had senators. We had House members. We had House subcommittee members. In fact, the people who were writing the actual recon. And we had House leaders of major committees sending messages saying it's going in there. They not only said it verbally, they also wrote it. They also told viewers across the board. So we came up on July, and we were ready for the recon to become law. We had heard about it on this channel since April. In fact, I was the very first to record a video about forced stimulus in April, and many of those videos you've now seen on Encore on this channel. We came to July, we were ready, July 4th, and suddenly it doesn't get called for a vote. What happened? At that point, somewhere between April and July, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer learned that they did not have 50 of 50 senators to approve the recon. Now, why did they wait to July? Not very particularly clear, but somewhere along the lines, during a series of meetings between the White House, Chuck Schumer, and Nancy Pelosi, one of those 3 people came up with the idea to split this monstrous legislation into 2 parts. Roads and bridges, which became infrastructure, and your recon, a separate body of law. The concept was that the people who were naysayers against the recon part, your money, would do the recon if you separated it away from the roads and bridges. Well, this was the first perhaps calculated mistake by the White House, agreeing to give a concession but getting nothing out of it, just a verbal potential okay. The verbal potential okay came from Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin, that if you took the roads and bridges out and did bipartisan, then they would support the recon. Well, unfortunately, the president didn't get that assurances in writing or verbally or in a press interview or anywhere. What he did do correctly, the president, was he put Kristen Sinema in charge of the roads and bridges infrastructure, so that by the end of the equation, by the final weeks of September, Kristen Sinema was no longer an opponent to the recon. She loved it and had every intention of voting in favor of it. He had one last person holding out, Joe Manchin. More about him in a second. So, came July, we had 2 bodies of legislation. Was it either called for a vote? No. Also, again, not particularly clear. If you separated them to appease 2 people, then why was neither of them called for a vote in July? Then came the fall. And if you've been on this channel since last year, you know how difficult it is to pass legislation in the summer. It's difficult to pass in the fall as well. The fastest and quickest time to pass legislation is the spring, because they're there for a lot of weeks. So came the fall, and then we were told it's going to pass very quickly. Well, here came the next calculated move. The progressive Democrats, led on the House by Pramila Jayapal, and on the Senate side by Bernie Sanders, said, we're not going to vote in favor of the roads and bridges unless you call the vote on the recon first. They had the alliance of senators, they had the alliance of House Democrats, and they blocked the vote, attempted by Nancy Pelosi once, twice on the House side. Why did Nancy Pelosi call the vote on the roads and bridges before the recon? Again, particularly unclear. She had attempted to get both the progressive and the moderate section of the Democrat caucus in the House to come to a kumbaya, and couldn't. Who were they? We had Representative Gothenheimer out of New Jersey, a moderate Democrat who went the salt cap. More about that in a second. And we had Pramila Jayapal and the progressives who wanted your money, lots of it, to be part of the recon. Now, neither was against either the other person's provision. They just want to ensure their provision was passed. And so Gothenheimer says, I'm going to block hers, and she said, I'm going to block his. So what did Nancy come up with the idea? Nancy came up with the idea to call the vote on the roads and bridges without the recon. That caused a private meeting with the White House. That caused a private meeting among the progressives, saying we're not going to allow the roads and bridges to vote. And they blocked it. That caused the next day, a Friday, the President of the United States to call a secret meeting with all the Democrats saying, you know what, we are never going to call the vote on the roads and bridges, anything else. Particularly a very bad calculated move. A very bad calculated move was for the progressives to eventually allow the roads and bridges to be called for a vote before the recon. Because the net takeaway was that they had no way to ensure their recon gets passed. This was their chip, their back card pocket, their card in their back pocket. The progressives blocking the roads and bridges for calling a vote. Well, they let the roads and bridges to be called for a vote. The roads and bridges was called for a vote. It became law. At that point, what did the progressives have in their back pocket? Really nothing except the president's assurances to them. And what happened from there? Well, in the days of Labor Day, Memorial Day weekend, Joe Biden had lots of meetings with Joe Manchin. And the meetings were not very successful. The meetings were very, very unsuccessful. Now, why were the meetings unsuccessful? And why was the meeting between Joe Manchin and Joe Biden even this week unsuccessful? Let's look at what part of the recon is really causing the angst tonight. The recon has $550 billion for climate in there. Joe Manchin is a senator from the state of West Virginia, a coal booming, fossil fuel burning state. His constituents, his voters, his donors are all big coal. And if you're talking about legislation to end big coal, he's going to oppose it. And he has the right to do it. Now, you would pause and you would think, wait a second. If the problem of the recon is the climate, and the climate is what Joe Manchin opposes, why not take the climate out? To this day, I have no answer for you. To this day, I have no answer for you on this subject matter. Why? Because Chuck Schumer specifically had multiple recons in his back pocket to use this year. I've detailed a lot on this channel. I even have a graphic on it where Chuck Schumer went to the Senate parliamentarian and says, I can do a redo of a prior recon. Now, this is going to get even stranger. Remember the third stimulus passed earlier this year? Yeah, Chuck Schumer actually has a ruling for the Senate parliamentarian. He can do another third stimulus redo, so long as it doesn't have climate in there. So this, again, another mistaken step by Chuck Schumer. He should have called for two separate recons. You want to do one for climate, do one for climate. And then do one that's sort of a redo a third stimulus that would send out more money to the American people. Mistake. Calculated, clear mistake. So what did he do? He had meetings with Joe Manchin. And Joe Manchin said, I want to do 1.5 trillion. I don't want to do 1.7 trillion. Very, very close, but not the cat's meow. It's only $200 billion off. The way you fix it, of course, you take climate out of there. Well, what happened in recent days? In recent days, Chuck Schumer had a letter, and he sent out the letter to his legislators and said, we're going to do the recon and get it to finality by Christmas. Two different quotes that Chuck Schumer had. The first quote was that the recon will become a law by Christmas Eve, December 24th. The second quote was the recon will pass the Senate by Christmas Eve. You've seen me detail this over the last 2 weeks. There's still enough time. There's still enough time even at the time of this recording to get that done. Then, what happened after those statements? After those statements, Mazie Hirono, Senator, Hawaii, and Dick Durbin, Senator, Illinois, both Democrats, said at some point you have to call the vote on the recon and see where people stand. Bernie Sanders, same quote. You have to call the recon, see where people stand. What are they referring to? They're referring to two words. Joe Manchin. If Joe Manchin's against a provision, you have to call the vote. And what would they teeing up? To basically say, see if it passes or see if it fails. Let's go over that subject matter right now. This, again, also not a particularly fluid or clear situation. Why does this president not want the fourth stimulus to fail and just try it again? Really unclear. I saw one of the great comments by Dragon in one of the live chats yesterday saying, Nancy just never wants to call somebody to fail. Well, absolutely true. But in this case, the president, Chuck Schumer, everyone involved did not want to call the fourth stimulus recon in the Senate and potentially have it fail because they're going to lose one vote from Joe Manchin for whatever potential reason is. I'm not saying it would, I'm saying it may. And they did. Even yesterday I said, well, the president could call the vote, see if it passes, maybe it passes. If it fails, then do it again in January, rather than just wait to January for everything. And yet the president did do that. Along the way came this strange mixed messaging in the last 48 hours that maybe we'll do a voting rights initiative before recon. At this point, it looked foolishness. It looked like foolishness. Why? Because everyone knows you, as the President of the United States, want to do the fourth stimulus recon. You want to do it. You want to get it now done now. Your head of the Senate, Chuck Schumer, says we're going to do it by Christmas. Everyone's talking about doing it by Christmas. And suddenly you say, maybe we will hold it off and do something much easier. Sounds sort of wimpy, doesn't it? Sounds like you don't want to confront whether it's going to pass or not. And I was deeply critical about it. And guess what? I wasn't alone. Democrat senators said the same thing. Guess what Democratic senators are saying minutes ago, right before I'm going on air? Democratic senators and especially Democratic House members. They say I'm running for re-election. I have a few months away from the midterm elections. And I'm going to look foolish going to the midterm elections because I've told my constituents this is going to become a law. And you haven't even called the vote. Why not just call the vote? It looks like we're not doing anything. At least call the vote. We make the effort and we show we made the effort. Very unclear. What happened in the last 48 hours? The last 48 hours is where it gets strange. If you just joined, there's a live chat. This is a special live edition of Afternoons LALATE, direct from Santa Monica, a special report of what has happened the last 40 hours on the fourth stimulus recon and where we are going from here as well. There's currently at least there's currently near 1,000 people watching on this channel right now. So jump in the live chat. We'll be answering some questions with you in just a second. Again, this is a special live report about what is going on with the fourth stimulus recon. So what happened in the last 48 hours? On Wednesday, the president was addressing the American people. Press reporters. They were asked, Mr. President, do you think the fourth stimulus recon is going to become law by Christmas? This was asked on Wednesday. He says, I believe so. He says, I think we have a very good, fair chance. On Wednesday and Tuesday, the President of the United States met with Joe Manchin, met with him. And during those meetings, did not go well. Did not go well. No progress on any front. What happened after that? Then Thursday, on this channel, I told you there was problems brewing with Chuck Schumer and the president. Now, you would rarely hear me ever say that the president of the United States and Chuck Schumer aren't getting along. What was that issue? Chuck Schumer was ready to issue a sentence, a letter, a statement to his senators because he had told them, we're going to start voting on this following Monday. He had already put in writing, we're voting this following Monday. So they're ready for the holidays. They're ready to know where they're supposed to leave or where they're supposed to ready to vote next week. They're like, Chuck, where's the guidance? Are we voting on Monday? And he said, I can't tell you because I'm waiting for the president's message. President's meeting with Joe Manchin. And why? The president's taking the lead on the negotiations at that point, as of Wednesday, with Joe Manchin. His choice. And Chuck Schumer doesn't know what to tell his senators. I don't know what to tell you because Chuck Schumer says the voting started on this following Monday in the Senate. And the messaging got out that Chuck Schumer was getting displeased with the situation. Meantime, the other senators, the progressive senators, like Liz Warren, were saying, recon, voting rights, don't say you call the vote on one or call the vote on the other. You may be left with nothing. And guess what? She's going to be exactly, by Christmas, guess what? She's going to be exactly correct now. Neither the voting rights nor the fourth stimulus recon is going to be passed by Christmas now because of what's about to be revealed in this video. But, so what did the president do between when Chuck Schumer said on Wednesday, that I need to know where we are, Mr. President, and Thursday? The president in 24 hours went from Wednesday telling press that he believes the fourth stimulus recon is going to become law by Christmas to coming back the next day, Thursday, 24 hours later, saying there is many more weeks to work on this recon. The quote is basically saying that there's a lot of stuff to be done from the same guy who 24 hours earlier said it's nearly done. What's going on? Let me explain the situation. And it's been very fascinating to be in the live chats with you because I've been able to see your comments of what you thought about the situation before even this video aired. Again, I'll be jumping in the live chat and interacting with you in just a second. What really happened? Why was the vote not ready to go on this coming Monday? Why was the vote not ready to go? The vote is not ready to go this following Monday for a series of errors that Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, and the White House have done since day one that really caused a domino effect that ended with Joe Manchin telling the president by Wednesday that he has not made up his mind whether he's voting in favor or against. Late Thursday, the President of the United States issued a statement to the American people that the fourth stimulus recon will not be called for a vote by Leader Schumer in the Senate before Christmas because there's weeks to be done on the recon. Now, well, actually, let me restate that. The actual quote says the recon will not be called for a vote now because there's weeks to go on. Let's be very literal, because when the press release came out and I read it, it actually doesn't mention that it's not going to be done by Christmas. It doesn't say that. You just have to assume by looking at the calendar it's not going to be done by Christmas. And so if you read an article wherever it is on any print article online, it's going to say the president admits it's not going to be done by Christmas. He doesn't actually say that in the quote. There's no mention of Christmas. There's no mention of New Year's. There's no mention of any date. He just says, I need a few more weeks. So why did he say that on Thursday? And on Wednesday, he said he was done because of Joe Manchin. Because he had these meetings with Joe Manchin on Wednesday and basically asked Joe Manchin, can you agree upon this recon? And Joe Manchin did not give him a yes. He did not give him a no, but he didn't give him a yes. And if you don't have that answer, then what do you do? Why is Joe Manchin at that position right now? And why was the president surprised with the situation? Here's what you need to know is, number one, the press release issued by the president late yesterday explained we need a few more weeks. Name checks Joe Manchin 3 times. Not once, but 3 times. So if there's any daggers going in, it's going in right there. And guess what? It's not that quote that is the most shocking one. It's the one that came in reaction to it. Did you read the Joe Manchin quote reacting to the president's quote or president's statement? Joe Manchin issued a statement Thursday saying, I saw the president issue a statement. That's his opinion of the situation. Oh, is this a Real Housewives reunion? I can't believe this is a senator talking about the leader of his own party that way, let alone the president of the United States. Joe Manchin saying, thank you for mentioning me 3 times in your press statement, but that's not my opinion of the situation or what we talked about. Okay, now, also, as if she loves to stir the pot, she's like, she's like the Nene Leakes of the situation. Elizabeth Warren comes on in and she says, Joe Manchin says he hasn't come to an agreement on like 1 or 2 provisions or 3 provisions in his statement. She says, I've sat with him and he said he came to an agreement upon it. Okay. So she's calling him disingenuous, to be very careful with my words. She's calling him a big, fat, disingenuous person, that he's actually agreed upon provisions face to face with her and saying that he hasn't agreed upon those things. Thank you, Liz, for fact checking us on that. Where does that leave the president by Thursday night? By Thursday night, the president of the United States must have thought to himself, wait a second. I originally had a monstrous bill back in April, which I could have passed in July, and I split it up into 2 legislations for this guy. I had Nancy remove and take out provisions because of this guy. I went weeks of negotiating with this guy, bringing him to my house in Delaware. I had this guy consistently saying one thing and stepping back, saying one thing and stepping back. For example, I have a graphic here. Joe Manchin in the month of June agreed upon how to pay for the recon. A 25% corporate tax rate. The president wanted 30. It's currently, I don't know, I forgot, 17%. Joe Manchin wanted higher than where it is right now, but not as high as the president. Joe Manchin yesterday said, I don't even have an opinion about the situation. I haven't made up my mind yet. Joe Manchin, you have to make your mind. You've been thinking about this for 6 months. You've been thinking about this for more than 6 weeks. I mean, yeah, it's time to make up your mind. Why is the situation where it is right now? The situation is where it is right now because the president gave concessions to one person over and over again and never got anything back from it. The president made a very calculated, great move with Kristen Sinema, which is put her in charge of the roads and bridges, put a heavy hand on the situation with her, get her to agree upon the medication, which she was against. Remember, her provision she was against was the cheaper medication, and get her on board, and he did, and he got her on board. He couldn't with the case of Joe Manchin. So why? And what will be the difference? If I was Joe Biden, what would I have done? What would I have done if I was Joe Biden? At this point, I'm going to jump in the live chat. Do you know, or do you have an opinion, what you would have done if you were Joe Biden and seen problems with Joe Manchin back in July? What would you have done? Jump in the live chat. I want to see your answers to the question, and then I'll have my opinion of the situation across the board. There's Diane, and there's Martha, and there is Jeffrey, and there's Dorothy. An executive order. Dorothy says an executive order. I like that, Dorothy. A lot of this you could have done by executive order. There's Leslie. There is Ernesto. Hey, Ernesto, how are you? I think he's from East LA. How are you, Ernesto? There's Losa, and there's Lisa, Diane, and American Patriot. How are you? If you were Joe Biden, people in the live chat, what would you have done with the recon back in July or before it was split and separated across the board? Here is Shandell. I would have called the vote period. Oh, I love that, Shandell. I love Shandell. So let's go over Shandell's. Am I pronouncing it right? Shalendell. Shalendell. My mistake. I love Shalendell's comment. So her comment was, instead of separating the roads and bridges from the recon back in June, I would just Shandell would just call the vote and see if it fails or works. I love that. You know why? Because if it fails, then everyone's going to ask the person who voted against it, why did you vote against it? And the person's going to have to answer the question. That's the concept of what Mazie Hirono and Dick Durbin and Bernie Sanders are saying. You call the vote, you got, and someone says, raise their hand and says no. Well, every press reporter is going to ask that person, why did you vote no? So you finally have clarity. And that person's face is going to be on the front page of everywhere with a affirmative statement. Here's Deanna, executive order. Deanna would have done it. Here's Paula. Schumer should have first voted out or retired and then taking McConnell with him. Melvin. Hey, Ally. Is Crayola Sushi in the room? Crayola Sushi's in the room. Margaret. Just got home from post. A lot of people said I would have done executive order. So what would I have done? What would I have done? First, I wish I could pull up the graphic. It would probably take me a few seconds, so I don't want to waste your time. I would have, if I was Chuck Schumer, I would have done different recons. I would have done one recon for the climate, and I would have done one recon for everything else. I would have taken out the real big issue for Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin's not against giving you checks. Joe Manchin's not against giving you childcare. Joe Manchin's not against giving you certain items. What Joe Manchin's against is ending coal burning in West Virginia. I mean, that's basically what he's against. And he's against doing anything that'll impact his corporate donors for his reelection campaigns. That's what Joe Manchin's against, which is he's fine. I mean, they all have corporate donors. I mean, let's not be silly. They all have corporate donors, and corporate donors guide what policies they do. But if there's a person that's the holdout, take the climate out and put it somewhere else. Case in point. Footnote. Remember the Glasgow Climate Conference a few months ago? The United States went to that with no agreement in hand, thinking that recon was going to become a law. And guess what? Those countries at that climate conference betted on the United States would pass a climate provision. They have not passed one because of the way they fit, because of what the situation is right now. Let me go back into the live chat. So Mary Cyrus says, I would have done executive order. I like that as well. Here's Doris. I would have let these behaviors go, demand the vote, keep promises. He's the president. So Doris, I love Doris' comments as well. A lot of people saying I would have just called the vote. I would have left everything alone like that and just called the vote. I think it's separating the roads and bridges from the recon was just so strange. If this is not even more stranger, let me make something clear. There's a lot of provisions that are in both the climate, both the roads and bridges and the recon that are very similar. Electric cars are in both of the two provisions. They're in both places because of the strange way of separating this out. Let me jump back in the live chats and see some of your comments. If you're just joining me, this is a special live report of Afternoons LALATE about the Four Symbols Recon. The Four Symbols Recon was to be finished next week. The President of the United States told the American people this Wednesday, no less than 48 hours ago. Then 24 hours ago, he said, we need a few more weeks. He didn't say what day, and he didn't say when, but he certainly say what day. Here is Zalran. They're mostly the most unapassionate they just like to build up drama. There is a lot of things that are very peculiar tonight that don't make sense in not passing it in December. First, many of the key provisions of the third stimulus are now expiring. Very key provisions that the Democrats have rested their hat on as the best things that they pass of this White House administration will now expire. And with them expiring, they're going to have to reinstitute them back into the fourth stimulus recon. Now, let me make this very clear. If you're one of the recipients of these provisions, it means that for the ones that are monthly provisions, that you're going to have lapsed months. For example, the child tax credit, the CTC, the $3,600, which is approximately $300 a month. You're going to have a month or two that you're not going to get it. I want to make something very clear because I know someone's going to ask it. Retro. There's nothing retro with Congress. So if this lapses and the CTC expires and you don't get a CTC for January or February, and let's say they pass it in late January and the first check goes out in March, you're not going to get that January, February check. It just never happened. How about, the MSCs back to July? No, they just don't do anything retroactively. Now, some of the provisions like the child care and the earning of tax credit, they're annualized provisions, so we're fine on that. You're okay with those provisions, especially with the hazard pay. But it's very peculiar that the Democratic caucus, whose best provisions are in the third stimulus, are now set to expire, and they did not get them done. Sound familiar? It should. This was the same group that allowed FPUC to expire in July. I've ran the quote, I've ran the video, I've ran the statement from Kamala Harris, who, when running for president, now VP Harris, said she would never allow FPUC to expire. In July 2020, she allowed it to expire. This is Nancy Pelosi, who originally went into the first stimulus package saying you were going to get 4 stimulus checks. Remember, the original first stimulus package in March of 2020 was going to have March, April, May, June. I think it was 4. It was 4 original checks in there. They took out the original 4 and reduced it to 1 because they said they were going to get it done again in a few weeks from then, around May or June. They didn't. They left town. This is a very familiar trait with these people. We will get to it. They said, we're not going to get 4 checks in there in March of 2020. We'll get the other 3 at a later day. We'll take out, they actually had 4 in there. They took the 3 out of the draft. We will get to the FPUC and we will let it expire. They let it expire. And, we could also talk about all the SS stuff, the SS 200, all the presidential promises. I'm going to get it done as soon as I become president. Didn't get in there as well. I mean, we could turn to Raphael Warnock, who ran out of Georgia for the Georgia Senate. He said, you elect him, he's going to give you a $2,000 stimulus check. He didn't give you a $2,000 stimulus check. In fact, he yesterday or 2 days ago said, let's call the vote on the Voting Rights Initiative amendment before the recon. Well, wait a second. I mean, you're the guy that was elected to do this. Let's jump back in the live chat and see some of the interaction. There are wealthy capitalists controlling Congress. Well, absolutely true. These legislators have very big, deep pockets in their hands. Here's an example, and that comment was by Paula. Great comment, Paula. So, example, the SALT cap. The SALT cap. What is that SALT cap? So currently you can only deduct $10,000 on your state and local tax return of what you pay in federal taxes. Why did the moderate Democrats hold up the recon unless Nancy put that in there? Because the moderate Democrats are from New York and New Jersey, where the tax rate is through the roof, and they're big Democratic donors that pay fortunes in taxes every year to the state of New York and New Jersey, wanted to be able to deduct more money than $10,000 that Trump gave them. So that is why Gothenheimer got to $72,500. So sound very Republican-ish? It is, but it's actually Democratic-ish. These are moderate Democrats who have very wealthy Democratic donors who said, I'm going to vote against the recon unless you can let me deduct big money from my tax return as a wealthy person. Yeah, that's sort of how they do it. I'll vote them out. Let's jump in more in the live chat. So one of the questions I had, if you're just joining this live chat, you're watching a special edition of Afternoons LA live from Santa Monica, going over this fourth stimulus recon, where we are what happened in 48 hours and where we're going to. That's coming up in just a second. And the question in this live broadcast is, what would you have done? Here's my, and continue to drop in your comments what you would have done. I'll answer. I'll read your comments on air. What would you do? So far, most viewers have said I would have called the vote on the entire body of legislation back in July, not separated out, not separated roads and bridges. I would have kept it together. What would I have done? I would have taken the climate, made its own recon, make a big climate recon, and then make all the stuff for Americans, because you're not climate, make all the money for Americans as its own recon. And you can leave the roads and bridges in there because no one's going to be really against roads and bridges. And have the Democrats pass the roads and bridges by recon. I mean, why take out the roads and bridges? It can go by recon. And make it easy. Instead, they kept the most polarizing provision that isolated Joe Manchin from day one in there, the climate. And if you see me record over the last few months, I talked about how in the third cluster, they had the clean energy provision in there. I told you maybe in like September, it finally got out. It was the Senator Kerry, or now climate czar Kerry, his determination to keep that clean energy provision in there, which Joe Manchin had told everyone, it's his prerogative. You keep clean energy in the recon, I'm voting against it. And they went 5 months keeping a provision that he said is a non-starter in there. See my point? Everything that's climate is polarizing the guy you need to vote for. If it's polarizing, take it all out and put it somewhere else and let it go its own path. And if it fails the climate. But keep our money in its own path and incubate it. It seems so obvious. Why did it not happen? Why did it not happen? Because the President of the United States, and I'm not going to say it's him, but I think it's sort of a Brian Deasy person. Someone in the White House thinks that you can pitch senators and the American people with legislation saying it's something when it's really something else. They have been pitching this entire package back in May as roads and bridges when it wasn't. It was roads and bridges and climate and social spending. Then when they separated them out, that they said the social spending was really just helping young children. No, it was also still climate. So they think they can sort of spin what the legislation is. It's not going to work with the people who are voting on it, like a Joe Manchin. So really unclear what happened. So let's go forward. Where are we going from here? What is next for the future of the forced stimulus recon? Number one, I believe it's going to pass. I believe it's going to pass. Number two, someone in this White House needs to wake up and realize the path they're doing this is not working. And the path is just meeting with Joe Manchin, Joe and Joe, some Joe and Joe meetings. It is never going to prove. How polarizing opposite are they right now? They're very, very opposite. Why does it sound different than perhaps a recording on this channel 30 days ago? For a series of reasons. One, the President of the United States keeps on telling us we're almost done. So I run his quotes. Chuck Schumer says we're almost done. I write his quotes. And then Joe Manchin says, I haven't made up my mind. I haven't made up my mind. That's what they're saying about my voice. And then people ask Joe Manchin, what's your voice? He said, I'm not going to tell you. So we have people who are trying to put words in other people's mouths and unfortunately leaves you guessing what the situation is. When the president, Chuck Schumer, tell you the situation, apparently it's untruthful. It says Joe Manchin. It's not really what the situation is. So if Joe Manchin is giving us a clear, a summary of where we are, he's basically saying they're very far apart on a lot of provisions. Not your money, but other provisions like how to pay for the recon. They need to bridge those gaps. If they can't bridge those gaps, they got to do something else. And guess what? If I was the President of the United States, I would say this is not working. The path they tried is not working, which is meet, have a lunch, meet, have a lunch, meet, have a lunch. As one, I think it was Tim Kaine or Dick Durbin, said in a brilliant quote. I love this quote. It was 2 days ago. He said, what I want to see this week is countless Democrats coming into the White House, meeting with the president on the hour, by the hour. Did you see those meetings? No. It was just Joe Biden having 2 meetings with Joe Manchin. Effort, I give it an F for effort. I'm sorry, Mr. President. I give it an F. I think that's not a good effort. You had two meetings with one guy. I don't think it looks like you're really putting in an effort on this. I just don't think he is. And this is the guy who wants to control the situation. In fact, all the quotes from the Democrats say he's the guy who's going to get done. I don't think he put in the effort. I think he's overwhelmed with too many other things. And guess what the other quotes tonight say? The other quotes tonight from Democrats off the record who are running for re-election says our Democrat caucus has a mixed message everywhere. We're focusing on climate. We're focusing on children. We're focusing on going after Trump people from the riot at the Capitol. We have so many different messages, and we're not particularly getting from point A to point B. And I think it's right. I think it's very, very right. When you run for an office, you have to sort of stay on message. Day one of this presidency, record on this channel, I ran the recording, and the viewer's reaction was, did he really say that? Day one, he said, my priority is some stamps and climate. Day two, something in climate. Day three in climate. It's like enough of get ready with the climate. Guess what? He spent January to now on climate. He's gotten zero for his climate. He got a little bit of climate in the roads and bridges. He got zero for the climate. That climate jeopardized everything else. I mean, you jeopardize everything because of the climate, and now the climate you didn't even get. Let me jump back in the live chat. There is Marta. There is Tina. There is Sandy. I'm sorry, Biden is not capable and doesn't know what's going on. I'm not going to say he is mentally incapable, but I agree with Brenda's comment as he is not being briefed appropriately. There are certain people who are in his ear more than other people, and they are taking him in the wrong direction. You don't do things complicated in life. You just sort of do them simpler. And finally, this is no different from him or anyone else. There's too much of attention on being reelected. There's too much of attention on this White House about being reelected. Let's win an election. Let's win this. Let's win that. Guess what? They don't want to call the vote. Why? Because they think they're going to lose the vote and it's going to look horrible for the Democrat caucus. You can be very cynical, and I thought about it back in my mind. Jump in the live chat right now and say yes or no to this question. Do you think the president rolled the forced stimulus recon over to January to put it closer to the midterm elections so that it passes close to the midterm elections? Yes or no? Do you think that he thinks it's better to pass the recon in 2022 because it's closer to the midterm elections than to pass it now? And he's using it for political. There says Mary. I agree, Ally. Let's see. Ann says Brian DC is incompetent. Let's see. Here's people agreeing as well. Maureen says yes. Lacey says yes. Larry says yes. Everyone's saying yes. Whoa. Do you see the live chat right now? Everyone is saying that. There's Deanna who says absolutely. Yes, 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 yes. Wow, the chat is now flying. You can see, I don't know if you can see chat rate. Oh, I guess I can see, you can see the chat rate. How many chats per second? It's flying. There's a no. There's a Dennis says no. But there's a lot of yes. I think yes. Why? There was a quote, I think I read to you on camera on Monday, where insiders said Joe Manchin and Joe Biden don't think it's any political damage to their careers if the forced stimulus recon is done in January instead of December. And I read the quote here. I'm like, I think it's very bad for them. I think it's very bad well, I don't think it's bad for Joe Manchin because he has coal miners supporting him. So they whatever he blocks the recon is good for Joe Manchin. Bad for Joe Biden? I think it's very bad for Joe Biden. I think it's very, very bad. It just, it doesn't look like it's getting done. It doesn't look like he's progressing. Leaving it close to the midterm elections, who does that sound like? Name the one legislator you know that loves to leave passage of a law right before a midterm election or non-passage of a law right before a midterm election to gauge voter sentiment. Is there a particular senator or House member who you think has done this in the last year? I know one. Is there one person we've covered on this channel who likes to not pass or pass things to manipulate midterm elections or general elections? And who do you think that is? Let's jump in the live chat if you think there is a individual who you have seen over the last year. And I'm looking for the name of a person. There it is. Yaya said it. Let's see if anyone else says it. I don't want to give it away. Let's see if anyone else says it as well. Both parties. There is Bob Bacon's not an issue. There's Judy. She got it. There's Maureen. She got it. Okay. Yeah. Pelosi. Everyone knows what Pelosi did in 2020. Pelosi could have had a deal with the president of the United States, Donald Trump. She could have had a deal with President Donald. They were this close. I mean, they're like $100 billion apart. They were so ridiculously close. She intentionally did not pass the second stimulus before November, so the president would not get reelected. We all know that. We all know that. It's very, very flavored at the moment that the recon is now being rolled over closer to the midterm elections. And guess who had meetings with the president yesterday before he made a determination? Chuck Schumer Nancy. Chuck Schumer Nancy. Just roll it over. Now, sound horrible? Does it sound horrible? Well, these are the people who allowed FPUC to expire in July. These are the people who had their own Democrats. Remember the moderate Democrats? What are they called? The Blue Dog Democrats. Remember the Blue Dog Democrats from July of last year? They wrote a letter to Chuck and Nancy saying, please extend PUA. Please extend PUA and UI. It's about to expire. And Nancy wanted to chase the postman, Louis DeJoy, because she thought that looks bad to get Trump reelected. Do a Louis DeJoy vote and to condemn him rather than just extend PUA and UI for an extra few weeks, which is the simplest vote in the world. I mean, let's be very frank. It's a simple vote. And everyone's writing her a letter to do that. And she doesn't do it because she's adamant about getting President Trump out of office. Well, this time around, fourth stimulus recon is being rolled over to the midterm elections closer. They're purposely doing all of this, says Lacey. So I think people, I don't want to put people's opinions in their mouth. Of course, this is a very opinionated statement by me, but I think that there is no explanation for a president of the United States who says on Wednesday, I believe we're going to get it done. And it's Wednesday. I mean, we're not going home on Wednesday night. He has Thursday, he has Friday, he has this weekend, he has all next week. You know, he has 11 more days to get this done. And with 11 days to go, he says, I think we can get it done. And then with 12 days to go, he says, I think we're going to get it done. And with 11 days to go, he says, no, we have a few more weeks to go. Come on. What's going on here? Okay, so let's go forward. Where are we going forward? Is this recon going to become a law? Yes. Is this recon going to become a law? Yes. Is it? What day is it going to become law? Hard to say. Now, what you're going to start to see is some Democrats going on the record saying this is going on too long. Get the vote. I hope you do. I really hope you do. And they will help our situation to get this done sooner. One guy who's been very quiet, I told you over the last 2 weeks he's been very quiet, is Bernie Sanders. He has said nothing in nearly a week about the situation. Nothing. He hasn't said anything positive, he just hasn't said anything. He's talked about some, protests of some union in the Northeast. I mean, so there is clearly some people that may be very upset, but they're keeping their mouths quiet. But you would hope those Democrats really step up and say something and stop saying this sort of like, positivity. There was a Jalopal quote that did come out 24 hours ago where she said, I believe it's going to happen, and I think it's good, and I think it's good. I think, I would hope that Jalopal goes in with more substance than just sort of cloudy statements. Remember that American people do not buy into a proposal. They buy into something when it's in your hand. When they actually get the money and they see the money in the mail, then they like you. If you say you're going to do something, you don't do it, then they see it as you didn't do it. Be it positive, it's not over. Yes. So the reason, and that's a great comment from Zan, the reason why I'm making this recording as sort of a one-time video and I may do it on evenings right after this. Join me. What time is it now? 3:20. I may go right on air right after this with a special live edition of Evenings LA earlier. Why I made this recording is because I want to show you where we are, because it's insanely complicated. Where are we right now? The recon will still. The only thing I have made an error in reporting over the last year is that I thought that recons die after a congressional term. That meaning the spring term, they're dead, and the fall term, they're dead. That was the only error I made in procedural descriptions in this channel, I think, in 2021. The recon will still be around. It passed the House, and it's still sitting in the Senate. So that is where that recon is, and if you call it for a vote and it passes the Senate today, all the president has to do is sign it, and it's law. It's as simple as that. Where should we be focused? Where we should be focused is as if we are waiting for the subcommittee of the House to pass the legislation. Because guess what? If you've been with me for over a year, you know when it's a fluid situations work on our benefit. No, people haven't agreed upon the whole thing. Well, if they haven't agreed upon the whole thing, then add our stuff in there. It's sort of like you went on Amazon to place an order to arrive for Christmas. It hasn't shipped. And you change, and saying you're like, oh, I want to add 5 more things in there. Okay, you can, because the order hasn't shipped yet. This order hasn't shipped yet. So you can go in there and demand the friggin' world in there because the recon isn't finished yet. So understand, everything you want can go in there. More of what you want that you may have haven't said in recent days, you can ask for more of what you want in that recon. And that is why things should be done. Michael Scott, I think LA, you should be president. You should do a good job. I really, really appreciate the kind comment. I think I would. To be president, you have to do the right policy, but you also have to do it in the right way. And I think that if I was to go in the live chat right now and ask how many people think it was right to do climate as the first body of policy of this White House, it was ridiculous. It was insane to do climate as the first policy of the White House. I mean, there's a lot of other things pressing than the climate as number one. It didn't make any sense across the board. And advocacy is absolutely important. Advocacy is very important. Let me read Martha's comment. So Martha doesn't know if advocacy is important. Let me make it very clear to you. Liz Warren is feeling the same thing you're feeling tonight. She actually said the same thing. Just call the darn vote. Mazie Rono, Dick Durbin. These people, these senators who want you to have this money, they're feeling the same feeling you are. So you absolutely have to advocate. Why is it bad not to advocate? Let me explain why it's bad not to advocate. And we know this because the senators have told us this. If you do not advocate, they think you don't want something. So, as unemployment is improving, as labor participation is improving, as people are getting back to work, as there's good economic factors, I can cite some good economic factors. They're going to say, oh, there's good economic factors out there. Maybe people don't want the money. You got to say, no, I need the money. I need the money because while there's this stuff that's good out in the economic numbers, there's this stuff that's bad, and this bad stuff is impacting my livelihood. This is why I need the money. They live in DC, they go back to their home state, but they don't know all the states, and they don't know all the walks of life. As a legislator, they're elected to hear what's going on with you. And they don't hear it unless you call. And so that's why it's very important to do it. And Nancy said, LA, run for Nancy's seat. You mean this Nancy or the other Nancy? I can't because the way House seats are, you have to be in her jurisdiction. So she's in San Francisco. I could run as a House member and then try to run for Speaker of the House. But you can't, to become Speaker of the House, you have to be elected by fellow House members. But I really appreciate that. And she's probably going away. She's probably retiring in the next year anyway as well. If the representatives gets back in power, you get nothing. Remember that. Absolutely. That is not to January 2023. So if the House falls to the Republicans, that would only impact in 2023. And there we go, 55 minutes. Wow, what a long video. Join me next on a special live edition of Evenings LALATE as well. Meantime, have you not seen our new programming lineup on Evenings? It's totally new, and it started last night. I brought in a new show called Evenings Extra. And boy, have you really liked it. Perhaps because of the time slot. We now have Evenings LALATE at 5. Then we have Evenings Countdown at 6. We have Holidays Stream Stimulus at 7. Calcino at 8. And now, for some people who rather have a lot more information late at night at 8 o'clock, opposite Calcino is a new show called Evenings Extra. Join me tonight on that show as well. Thank you for joining me across the board. Join me next, perhaps in the next 10 minutes. I'm going to go right back on air as we go into a special live edition of Evenings LALATE. It's an Evenings Countdown. And do not miss the Overnight Crypto Show. These videos will not take you automatically into them because they're live. They're not going to send you in them. But first, subscribe, like this video, and consider becoming a member. Have a beautiful evening across the board. Stay informed, stay focused, and stay with LA for more.